Hi everyone, my name is Emily and I am a crocheter and knitter in North Carolina in the United States. And today I have 2 sweaters, 2 cardigans, and a tank top. These are all crochet patterns from Knits and Knots. You may have heard of Janine Miska if you're in the crochet world. She makes beautiful, beautiful patterns that are really well written and really beginner friendly. If you guys haven't heard of her, then definitely check her out. This video is not sponsored. I just want to say that. This video is not sponsored in any way. I am just a huge fan and decided that I wanted to share my journey with you guys today. As I talk about each pattern, I will show you guys the finished object. I'll tell you the name of the pattern, the yarn that I use, things I love about the pattern, and also mistakes I made along the way, because there were definitely a lot of them. I will also include the links to the patterns and the yarn in the description below, and anything else I mentioned along the way, I'll make sure to include that. I just want to emphasize the fact that even though I'm going to go into great detail about the mistakes that I made along the way, I still totally love what I made. Mistakes are just part of the process. They happen with every project. I have been crocheting for a long time and I still make a lot of mistakes. Even though I'm going to talk about the long journey that some of these projects have been, I still recommend the patterns, still love them. They're great. I hope that the biggest thing you take away from this video is that even when you make mistakes, you can still end up with something that you love. The very first Knits and Knots pattern that I ever made was also the pattern that introduced me to Janine and Knits and Knots, and that is the chainette turtleneck. Let me see if I can show you guys a little bit. I'll also include video of me wearing the finished objects. And I remember when I first saw a picture of this pattern on Pinterest, I had never really seen crochet patterns on Pinterest before, at least for sweaters. I mean, I've seen tons of crochet patterns, but I think it was only like the second crochet sweater that I had seen, and I was immediately obsessed. I was amazed. This is a fantastic pattern. The stitch pattern, I think, is what really drew me to it. The yarn that is used is Lion brand Chainette. It is a worsted weight yarn. It is a blown yarn that is 65% baby alpaca and 35% nylon. And it's really light. The color that I don't remember what the color was at the time, but I went back and looked at the website and the color is no longer available. But I don't know, maybe Lion Brand brings colors back, so you might be able to get it later. Or if you find some other blown yarn with alpaca and nylon in it that's in this similar to this color, that'll probably work just as well. One of my favorite parts of this sweater is the stitch pattern. Janine did a really good job. She has 3 patterns that are very similar because they use the same stitch pattern. The first one was the rosebud raglan. The second one was this one, the chainette turtleneck. And then the third one, and the next one I'll show you, was the rosebud cardigan. And they all use the same stitch pattern. And I think it just really helps the sweater not have that kind of blocky look that crochet can have. It softens the corners and it even hides where each round ends. Like normally when you crochet, you can see where you crochet to join and then chained up. The only way I can tell what the back of the sweater is, like they look the same. And they pretty much are the same. The only way I can tell which way is the back is if I look at the cowl neck. I can see that there's a big difference. So it's just all around a beautiful sweater. And when I fold down the cowl neck like this, like you can't even tell. You can't even see it. So let me get into the journey that I had with this sweater. I asked for the yarn and the pattern for Christmas. I had been used to using acrylic yarns for things, and this specific yarn was kind of my introduction to using anything besides acrylic, and it's definitely more expensive than acrylic is. So I asked for it for Christmas, and I didn't immediately start crocheting it when I opened up the yarn, but it was that day. It was pretty soon after, and I was super excited to get started. And that's kind of where I went wrong at the beginning. I was at my sister-in-law's house and it was Christmas Day. I brought my hooks, but I didn't have the right size, which was a size K or a 6.5 millimeter crochet hook. I believe I had a I or a J. And so I had a smaller hook, and in her patterns, Janine always includes a gauge swatch pattern, which is great. And I remember doing it, but I also didn't have a tape measure. So I think I made the gauge swatch, but I didn't actually measure it. I think I just looked at it and was like, I think like the front of my finger is an inch. And so I was like measuring it out, and I was like, oh, it looks good. So I also couldn't measure my size because I didn't have a tape measure. And so I was just like, oh, a size medium should be totally fine. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, you gotta know your size, you gotta get the right hook. And I know those things now. And I just remember I made this part while I was there, the cowl part, and I tried it on my head for the first time, and I had to like squeeze it down. And I was just like, this seems a little tight, and it was like around my neck. It was also just like really up close. And I was like, hers isn't like that. I was like, maybe it'll stretch out. The other factor was the fact that I was halfway through my pregnancy with my son, and so my body was a whole completely different size than I was used to, and I didn't quite know how to figure out what size I was going to be when I went after I had my son. And so I think I was just crossing my fingers and going for it. And I kept going, and I was just super excited to keep going, because I remember it was around New Year's when I tried it on again, and I think I have a picture somewhere, and I had done most of the body, maybe part of the sleeve, and it was just really tight. And so I kept going, and I got to the last sleeve, and I actually didn't have quite enough to do the rest of the second sleeve. So I ordered another skein of the yarn, and got it, and it came, and I finished it. And I think I might have even added more to the bottom because I had the extra yarn. And I put it in my closet and said, when my son is born, I'll try this on again and I'll see how it is. And after my son was born, body went back to pretty much normal, and I put it on, and I was like, oh, it's way too small. I looked myself in the mirror and was like, if you're not gonna wear it, you're not gonna wear it. Gotta just try again. I am not afraid to rip things out and try again. Honestly, I think a lot of people have a hard time with wanting to rip things out because of the time investment they put in, and for other reasons. Everyone has their own philosophy on this, but in my mind, I'm like, if I crochet something and then I never wear it, then that's more of a waste of the time than if I just completely rip it out and do it again. And usually when I do things a second or a third time, it's even better than it was. So then I end up with an even better sweater than before. So even though it took me twice as long to make it, that time was totally worth it, because in the end I have something I really like. So I believe I might have ripped the entire thing out. I think that I might have left the cowl, but I think because it was so tight, I ripped it all the way out. And by that time, I had gotten a K-hook. I got the right size hook, and I started over again. And I believe that I'm sure I measured to make sure that my gauge was right. And I remember getting to the part where I divided for the body and the sleeves. And I remember thinking that the sleeve was kind of tight. So I went to the next size up. I think I went from a size medium. Yeah, I went from a size medium to a size large. And it definitely is big. It's definitely big now. I'll have videos. I'm sure you guys, I've already put the video up, then you guys will see what I'm talking about. And I remember finishing it, and it was the middle of summer, so I didn't actually end up wearing it until that winter, and I was so excited. Most of the process, I was just super excited, and I started wearing it, and at that time I was also learning more about fiber content and the way that different natural fibers act based on like alpaca or wool or plant-based fibers. Alpaca grows a lot, and this is the project where I learned that, because I noticed over time that the stitches were kind of sagging, and it didn't look as like plump and soft as it did before. It was more like this, and But I wore it all the time. It didn't hold me back. I totally wore it all the time. I had it as my at-home cozy sweater on the couch when I was cold, or if I was going on walks, I would wear it underneath my coat. But I noticed that I stopped wearing it as often because I just, like, it didn't quite look how I thought like it did at the beginning. I washed and blocked this for the first time in preparation for this video, and I wish I had done it sooner because the yarn is definitely softer. It's like, this yarn has a little bit of an itch. I am extremely sensitive to itch, but this one, it's not too bad, especially when it's cold. Right now it's like 90 degrees outside and I'm inside in the AC, but when it gets colder, like, I don't even really notice it, but it definitely feels softer now that I've blocked it. So this sweater went from being too small to really oversized. Part of me wants to do it again and possibly use just a smaller hook, just so that I don't get like the big gaps in there. But for now, I'm gonna wear it. I'm gonna wear it. I'm gonna love it. It's cozy. I love the color. I love the silhouette. It's just great. It's a great pattern. So next, we have the next project that I did is the Rosebud Raglan. So this is the Rosebud Raglan. Or no, I take that back. This is the Rosebud Cardigan. I also have the Rosebud Raglan pattern, but I haven't made that one yet. I decided to do this one instead. So this cardigan is basically the Rosebud Raglan in cardigan form. It's the same stitch pattern, same yarn, just worked differently so that it will be open in the front. The yarn is Lion Brand Jeans in the color Top Stitch, and I think the color is the thing that drew me to this pattern the most. It's beautiful, beautiful orange, like rusty orange, burnt orange color. And Janine talks about how this acrylic yarn is very soft compared to other acrylic yarns that she's used. And at first I got this skein and I was like, I mean, I guess like it's soft, it's not like crazy soft, but once I started to feel the finished fabric, that's when I was like, oh, okay, I get what she's talking about. Compared to the chain knit turtleneck, this pattern went by really, really fast. It was super easy. I don't remember any problems in particular. Yeah, I used the right size hook. I think I matched gauge. The only thing that I would have changed is I think I would have made a bigger size. After the chain knit turtleneck, I got concerned about it being too big and oversized, and I didn't want to have too many big and oversized sweaters, so I went with the size small. I think I could have gone with the size medium. When I put it on, I can't quite wrap it all the way around. I made the pockets and the waist tie like she has, and put the little belt loops on here. But I still had yarn left over. I think I could have gone with the size medium. The other thing about this is that it can get really warm really fast. Acrylic yarn doesn't breathe like wool does or other fibers do. It holds that heat in a lot. So when I'm wearing this, if it's not really cold outside, I do notice that I tend to like take it off and put it on a lot just because I get overheated. But that's mostly when I'm inside, especially if I'm in like a crowded room or playing with my son, I get really warm. But when it's really cold, that's really nice. So it's not a problem with the yarn or the pattern. It's just like, be aware if you're going to use acrylic yarn for things. If you haven't, just know it's not going to breathe very well. But yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful pattern. This next sweater was an even longer journey than the chain knit turtleneck, but let me introduce it first. This is the Timber Lodge stripe pullover, and it is also, I didn't mention that the Rosebud Raglan is a pattern that is in Janine's book, Modern Crochet Sweaters. Totally recommend it. This is also a pattern in that book. I got the book when it came out back in like January. I got it in January 2022, I believe, and I got the ebook version. So I just have it on my phone and an iPad, and I always use patterns on my phone, so I figured that would be the best way for me to have it. I kind of wish I bought the physical book just because the pictures are so beautiful, but it's what it is. Maybe at some point I'll get the actual physical book. But I remember seeing Janine show the progress of this on Instagram before the book came out, and I knew I was going to have to make it because I love the stripe design. I just think it is so cool. It's a 70s inspired sweater, and it's just, I love the colors, I love the multiple stripes, it's just really cool. Where I first went wrong with this sweater is I went to the yarn store. It was for my birthday and I was super excited, and I was looking at yarn and I found this yarn, and it was perfect colors, and I was trying to see if it was the right size because the pattern calls for a yarn that was discontinued. It was Crochet Paragon Sport, so it was a sportwear yarn, but the yarn was discontinued right about when the book came out, and I was so disappointed because up to this point I had always just used the yarn that Janine recommended, and so this time I couldn't, so I was on my own, and it was probably the first time I, at least in crocheting, had substituted the yarn on my own. And I was at the yarn store and I found this yarn, and I was trying to look at the ball band to see if it would work. And I remember looking at the pattern on my phone and being like, okay, it's this gauge in crocheting, but I could only find the knitting gauge on the label. And so I was just like, I remember standing there thinking like, I think it looks like sport weight. It seems like it should work. It's a thinner yarn. I think it'll be okay. It's sock yarn. It was fingering weight. I don't remember when, but I got home and I realized it was fingering weight, and which is like, it goes like the yarn sizes go fingering, sport, DK, worsted, Aran. So it was a size too small. But I went forward with it anyway. I'm not afraid to make things up on my own. I kind of wish that I hadn't though. But it turned out beautiful anyway, right? Like I was saying earlier, it just, when I started with the ribbing, you start at the bottom with this ribbing. I made the ribbing and it takes forever. It's so long. Like I remember getting to the length, like the number that she recommends, and thinking it's just too small. You do the ribbing and then you start crocheting this way, and so I did a couple of rows and then tried putting on. It was way too small, so I kept ripping back, adding on rows and trying again, and still too small. And I got it to the point where it seemed just right, and then started working, and it was doing pretty good. It was a little snug. The second mistake I made was that I didn't count my stitches. I have been crocheting for a long time, so I was really overconfident, didn't double check myself, thought I knew how to crochet in the round, and I was accidentally dropping stitches every single time that I changed rows, or changed rounds, that's what it's called. It's in the round. So every time I hit a new row and went up, I was dropping a stitch. And that meant by the time that I finally got to the mustard, I was so excited to finally get to the mustard part. When I finally got there, I tried it on again, and I just like admitted to myself, like, I've been dropping stitches. And so I was like, do I go back and redo the bottom, or do I just move forward and then add to the bust area? Which is what I did. I did the mustard part, and I made sure I didn't drop any stitches. And then when I got back to the white and the black stripes, I made sure that I added, I can't show you, I don't know what I'm trying to show you because it was on, I ended up ripping that out. I went back and I made sure to add here, so it was like an hourglass shape, and it was working pretty good. It fit in the right areas. And then I tried to do the shoulders, and this pattern is a drop shoulder pattern, which means that it's like straight up, and so it hangs off your shoulder a little bit when it's oversized, and then you knit or you crochet the sleeve. And because the sweater was so tight and form-fitting, the sleeve ended here, and so I was like, you know what, I'll just make a cap, I'll just do the math and I'll figure it out. So I did the shoulders, at least one shoulder, and I remember still looking at the back when I was wearing it and being like, it's pretty tight. And so I got to the shoulders, and then I started on the sleeves, which is you do the same, you do the ribbing and you go up. And I made sure I didn't drop stitches, and I got both sleeves to like where I would put them on and they'd fit about here. And then I tried to start doing the sleeve cap, and I at some point must have gotten frustrated because I just quit, and it went into the pile of like objects that I'm ignoring because I'm frustrated with them. And later, like a long time later, I finally pulled it out again and I put it on, and it was the same story as the J-net turtleneck, and I was like, it is way too tight. I'm not gonna wear like a skin tight sweater like this. It's not the look I was going for. It's not the original pattern. The sleeve thing is frustrating me. So I was like, I'm gonna do it. I ripped it back out all the way down to this first row of single, or no, it's not single crochet, it's half double crochet. I ripped it all the way back down to the half double crochet, the very first row, and I had all these little balls of yarn everywhere, trying to remember which stripe was like which size. And I did it all the way back up again, making sure I didn't drop any stitches. It was still a little snug, but no, like when I would put it on, I'd have to like slip into it. This time it was totally fine. I could get into it, no problem. A little snug, but not too tight like it was before. And by this time I had the idea, why don't I just turn it into a yoke sweater? I've been knitting for a while, so I was familiar with the concept of yokes when you're knitting, and with bottom up yokes where I might be saying yoke sweaters where you start at the bottom, you do the sleeve and you work up to here, and then you do the bottom, like the body up to the same point, and then you just go around. You go around the body, leave a couple of stitches at the side for the body and the sleeve that you will just seam together. Leave like, I think I left like 5 stitches, and then you go around the sleeve, around the body, around the sleeve, leaving those same number of stitches, and back, except the seam is in the back. And then you decrease as you go up, and then do the neckband. So that's what I did, and it actually worked, and I was really proud of myself. I just get sport weight yarn. I don't recommend this process. Just get sport weight yarn, do the right pattern. Yeah, just so I got to where I thought I wanted the neckline to be right here, and it was just straight up. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to decrease. And so I counted the whole the total number of stitches, and I don't remember exactly what it was. But I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna decrease every 3 or 4 stitches, maybe 5. And so I did that all the way around, and then it didn't look quite right. So I went back and tightened up the decrease a lot so that it would look like the rest of the stitches. Can't really see. I don't know. I might have to do a separate video and show you guys the top, but I then continued, and then I would do a row of no decreases or around, and then I did a round of decreases again, decreasing closer like every 3 stitches, and then I did a non-decrease round, and then one where I decreased every 2 stitches. And then when I got it to the point that, oh, I also forgot to say that when I started doing the short rows, which is what I was calling them, I took the beginning of round marker from the back, I cut the yarn, and I brought the beginning over here and went around so that I wouldn't have to worry about like a weird thing in the back with like stepping up to the next row. I just started from the beginning and went around, and I decreased so that the neckline would go like this. And then when it looked good, I cut the yarn and I joined the black for the ribbing, and I did a much shorter ribbing than hers. Janine's was a lot longer, and it just looked very like weird on the version that I did. So I only did like 4 or 5 stitches, did the neckline, put it on, and liked it. And yeah, I was super proud of myself for figuring that out. Like I said, don't recommend it, but it turned out pretty good. And this sweater was still a little snug, so I knew the yarn was superwash yarn because it was a sock yarn, superwash, and I had heard that superwash yarn grows a lot, and I thought, I know that they're meaning that gravity pulls it down, and so it stretches more this way than this way. But I was like, maybe when I'm blocking it, if I just stretch it more horizontally, then as it grows vertically, it'll still like grow horizontally. And so I blocked it a couple of days ago, and it grew way more than I was expecting. I have a picture. It looked like spaghetti noodles. The arms looked like spaghetti noodles, and it just grew a ton. And when it was wet, it was a lot wider, but then I didn't pin it as I dry it. I might redo the blocking process and actually pin down the sweater at the width that I want, because it was like 38 inches around, or so, or 40 inches around, which I have like a 35-inch bust, or 36, something like that. So it was bigger, but then as it dried, it shrank. I just have like a laundry hanging thing where I can set things to dry, and I didn't pin it. So I think I might try repinning it, because it just grew a lot this way. Like, it's at least like a couple of inches longer than it was, which I knew it was gonna grow, but I was not ready for that. It was the first time I had blocked superwash yarn. So the sleeves are a little bit, like, they're just slightly too long for comfort. I can feel like the length on it, but I do like to have really long sleeves that I can pull my hands into to get cozy. So I don't know, I might leave it as it is. I'm gonna give it a season, try it out, and if it's still just too long, I'll figure out something. But I still love the design, still love the colors, super excited to wear it, see how it goes. So that is the Timber Lodge stripe pullover. The next pattern I have, I think might actually be my favorite. Just the finished object itself. This is the Timberwood tank. And when I first saw this pattern, I was not obsessed as much as I was with the other ones. It grew on me as I was making it. I remember thinking, that looks really good. And I'm not sure if it's like exactly something that I would like, but I just went for it. Apparently I just went for it, and it's becoming one of my favorite things that I made. It just looks so polished, and you did such a good job. It just looks so polished and so professional, and I love the color. I love how the fabric feels. This is made with Lion Brand Collection Superwash Merino. It's a DK weight, 100% superwash merino, which, like, after my last project, you would think, like, why would you do superwash? But this, I blocked it and it didn't grow. I think it's because the rows go this way rather than horizontally. It just has not stretched like that other sweater did. And the process was pretty good. I remember I did this, you'd start with this central part right here, and I started, and I think I got to like an inch or two up, and I noticed I was dropping stitches, and I counted them, and I was dropping them, so I ripped back and did it again and figured out a way. It was kind of hard. It's like a different stitch than I've ever used, but I figured out a pattern that worked for me all the way up. And then you do these two parts, and then you come over here and work this way up and down, and then you do short rows. I did the short rows on the first side, I went around, and then the second side, I remember in the moment when I was making it, it's either this side or I don't even remember. I remember thinking that the German short rows looked different, but now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I can't even tell. I forgot that I thought they were different, and now I think they look great. So yeah, I don't know. I really don't have any complaints about this. Oh, I did try to add sleeves on. I couldn't figure out anything that worked, so I just am embracing it as it is. If I get cold, I'll layer up, and I'm just gonna give this a test run. I haven't worn it out yet, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, this is the Timberwood tank. This last pattern is the Maple Grove cardigan. Mine is significantly different than Janine's. I used a different hook size on purpose. I used a different yarn because it was yarn I had in my stash, and I did not have nearly enough to make the really long version that she did, and that's why I use a different hook size. I had this yarn in my stash for a long time, and I knew I wanted to make a cardigan because when I bought it at Michael's, I just loved the color. That's why I got it. I wanted to make a cardigan out of it, but I couldn't figure out a knitting pattern, a knitting stitch pattern that I liked. I was trying to do something knit, and then I remembered that I had this book, Modern Crochet Sweaters, and so I started looking through all of the patterns, and I found the Maple Grove cardigan, and I really liked the texture of, this is linen stitch, moss stitch, granite stitch, just where you single crochet, chain, and then single crochet, and then on the next row you chain over the single crochets and crochet into the chain spaces, the moss stitch. And so I was worried also, again, because of the chain turtleneck, I was worried about a lot of stretching out. This stitch pattern stretch, it grows a lot over time with just from hanging. And Janine talks about that in her book. And so I was like, okay, I don't want it to stretch too much. And I also don't have nearly enough yarn. So I used just a 5.0 millimeter or H8 hook and just kind of went for it. I did a swatch and realized that I needed to do a size large, or actually I think it was extra large, to be able to make the smaller gauge be roomy enough on me. So I started with the back, and you go up first, and so I made the back the length that I thought would be enough to get to have enough yarn left over at the end. Made the fronts, made the sleeves, and then I didn't do the finishing that she did. In the finishing, she goes around multiple times on the front and the bottoms. I just went up once around the neckline to give it a nice edge, and then I just did single crochet rows at the bottom until I ran out of yarn. And after all of the seaming and the tucking in the ends and everything, I think I literally had 3 feet, maybe a meter of yarn left. And I did a good job guessing, and it looks good. It's not super long, but I think it's a good length. It's already starting to stretch out the top when I wear it, and I'm hoping it kind of will pull down and give it a little bit more of an open look. Oh, I forgot to mention that I used baby cakes, Karen baby cakes, in the color, it says the color's white, but this is definitely more of an off-white with a slight hint of pink to it. I don't really recommend the yarn, as I've been putting it on even inside in the AC, it feels scratchy, and I thought that baby yarn was supposed to be soft, but it's been kind of scratchy, but we'll see how it goes. I still like it. Still excited to have a neutral color to go with a lot of things. So if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this inspired you to make something from Knits and Knots, or inspired you to try picking up something that you've abandoned for a while and try again. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm a crocheter and a knitter. 99% of the content that I watch online is knitting related, and a lot of knit podcasters talk about sometimes they do crochet and stuff, and they tend to do baby blankets and other things. I don't really see crochet sweaters. So if you guys know of people on YouTube who share their crochet sweaters, I would love some recommendations. You can put them in the comments below. If you have other designers that you love, I'd also like to know that. I obviously need to branch out a little bit. I'm looking for more patterns, more designers, YouTube content creators that I can watch. I want to dive more into the world of crochet online. So please share your recommendations. Thanks, everyone.